Alright, welcome back to the second part of this bounce plugin that we are creating in Lightwave 3D. So if you haven't watched my previous video on this topic, please do so. Otherwise, most of this won't make any sense. So far what we've done is this. Okay, but if you go down here, if you're using Sublime Text like me, go down bottom right where it says plain text and convert this to JavaScript so that we see some nice coloring here. It helps to see errors sometimes. Okay, so what we need to do now is to figure out how to know the position, rotation, and scale of the object that our plugin has been added to. And that is actually very, very easy. So first of all, let's get the position. Now, in order to get the position, we want to assign it to a variable. So we're going to call that variable POS. You can call it anything you want, of course, since it's just a variable. Now, to do that, we're going to use the MA, which is this one. So if you're not using MA, type whatever you've typed here. Say ma.get, because we want to get the position. So I'm going to write position like that. Now in here we have to add the time, the current time. Now conveniently we have this time right there. That's why it's actually there, so that we know the current time. So we want to know the position at the current time. Now in my own experience, I found that this time is not very reliable. Sometimes you can pull your hair out thinking something wrong with the calculations you've added. So I prefer to use the scene time. So in order to do that, I'm going to type scene is equal to capital scene, like that, open close bracket. I prefer to use the scene time because it's more reliable. But why am I putting this up here? Because it will work just as well if I put it down here. Now the thing is, as you noticed, every time we move or do something to the object, the process function is called. It runs every time. Now, since I don't need to keep doing this every time the thing runs, that's why I've put it up here, so it doesn't run together with this. Because doing this actually takes processing power on the computer's part. So the less processing it has to do, the quicker my plugin is going to function. So since this item only needs to run once, I could even put it in here in the create. That's even better. But the problem is, if I add, let's say, a variable in here, and let's say I just say a is equal to 4, something like that. This a is a variable and can be accessed inside this function, but this function right here cannot access this a. If I want this a accessible to all functions, I have to move this to there. So once it's here, it can be accessed by any function. But if it's inside a function, it can only be accessed inside that function. That is called the scope of a variable. So I'm putting the scene up here so that the scope of this scene is global, so that any function can access it. A variable inside a function is called a local variable, but one that is here is called a global one. Alright, so enough of that sidetrack. So let me save that. I'll put it up here so that it's accessible to everyone and remove it there. So I'm going to use the scene time instead by doing scene.current time, like that. Now, since pause contains a value, let's see what that value is by adding the info button. So let's go back to layout, remove that, add it again, and now we see a vector. Now this is a vector because it's got 3 numbers here. It's got a position 0, 0, 0, XYZ, so it's a vector. So it's showing us that currently here this is at 0, 0, 0, which is actually true. So you can press the escape key as usual to remove that. By the way, you can disable a plugin and move around so it doesn't annoy you so much, and then switch it on when you need to see the values. Okay, so you can do the same with rotation just by changing this to rotation, like so. Then you are getting rotation instead. For scale, you would think you have to write scale, but no, you have to write scaling, like so. Alrighty then. Now that we have that out of the way, now if you want to get, for example, as you've noticed, the vector is 3 numbers. Now if I just want to get the x, I'll say pos dot x. Of course, for the y it's dot y, and the z it's dot z. So let's see that. Now instead of getting a vector, I'm going to get just a single number in case I want to use it for some calculation of some kind. Okay, so that's how you get a value. Now how do you set a value? So we have to be able to tell the object to move to a specific location or rotate to a specific angle. So in order to do that, we don't need a variable for this because we are just giving it information. We're going to say ma.set instead of get, and we do exactly the same thing. We're going to say position, but instead of giving the time, we want to give it a vector because we want to tell it be at this vector at right now. So let's create a vector. Let's say my vector. Now to create a vector, you put this less than sign, put 0, 0, 0 like that, and close it with a greater than sign. So this is a vector right here. So the numbers I put here can be anything. It can be 1, it can be 6, it can also be a decimal like 8 point something something. Or let me use small numbers like 2, here 3. Now this is a vector right here, so I can use this vector and put it here. So I'm saying my vector is equal to this, and then set the position of my item to this vector. So let's see if that actually works. So let me remove that and add there, and you see our object has moved to a new vector. Okay, so you can do exactly the same with the rotation and scale just by changing this to rotation and scaling as well. It will do exactly the same thing because all those numbers are vectors. Okay, so that's how you actually get and set the location of your item. So that's it for this part. In the next part, we're going to create some forces to act on our object, and I will see you in the next tutorial.